Pastor Yo from Nelson Avenue. We are starting this podcast series, hoping that the things we talk about in this series will be helpful, not just to Christians, but also to others. We're in a very unique time in our lives and in human history with the COVID-19 pandemic happening, and we thought, let's try something that might address maybe questions people have, fears that they're dealing with. So stay tuned for this podcast, but also for upcoming podcasts as we seek to really listen to what maybe God's saying to us in this time. This week, we're going to start a short series, just things that I'm learning and maybe you're learning during this COVID-19 pandemic. These are not the only things I'm learning, but as I've been reflecting on what's happening in our world and in our lives, from a Christian point of view, what are the things we're learning? What are the things we should be hearing? What are things that we need to be aware of as we go through this really, very, very unique time? And the one thing I'm learning, and it was early on as the pandemic was, we were realizing this was getting very serious, I used the word unprecedented. I either said that or I wrote that in an email to someone, and one of the leaders in our church said, well, it's not really that unprecedented. I mean, there have been times in world history where cities, countries, large parts of the world have been under some kind of plague or pandemic, which I kind of knew. And since then, I've done a little bit of reading on the Spanish flu that happened just after World War I. So I realized, this is serious. COVID-19 is serious. But there's also been other times that have been serious in the history of humanity. And one of the things I've been learning in terms of how the church responds, or how at least it's supposed to respond, is in the early church, but also throughout church history, there have been church leaders who have encouraged the church when the plague comes or the pandemic comes, although we're all maybe scared, worried, anxious, or maybe even fearful for our own lives, one of the movements of the Christian church is not away from people, but toward people. So there are lots of stories from the early church when the plague was besieging the city of Rome, and people were rushing away from the city. There are stories of Christians who either stayed in the city of Rome or went into the city to help people who were suffering under the plague. Now, I'm not saying every Christian can do that or every Christian should do that. There are sometimes reasons why you might not do that because others are depending on you. But there should be a movement in the Christian church where we actually move towards those who are affected and maybe even infected with the COVID-19 virus. We are thinking about them, we are praying for them, we are doing what we can. We aren't just thinking about ourselves, but also thinking about others. And this is what church history has taught me, that the church, in the name of Jesus, moves towards those who are suffering and struggling, trusting that Jesus will give us grace in those moments to move towards others with the love of God and the mercy of Christ. May that also be true in our day. So I think our calling in this time could be summarized in the words of Philippians chapter 2. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, even during a pandemic. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. Even in a pandemic, for the church of Christ to hear the words of Christ and to move towards others, to seek the well-being of others, even in these days. Thanks for joining us for this podcast. We hope it's been helpful for you. Stay tuned for more episodes coming up. And if you have any feedback for us, if it's been helpful for you, or if there are things that you want me or others to be talking about, do let us know. But until next time, I will see you then.